Welcome to this special edition of the Dynasty Pulse. I am bigz. I'm here with cheer boys, Grindberg and Trav. We got at TCL14. We got at FF Canuck 99 and myself. And we're here to talk about some things. We got rookie quarterbacks to talk about. We got other things to talk about. And we got Grindberg with the news. You want to kick it off, Grindberg?
Well, the news is that we got a special guest today, and we have none other than fellow Undroppables content manager for the YouTube channel and pretty much everything social with the Undroppables, our good friend and homie Travis Seel. What up, Trav? Tell us
what's
everything.
going on.
What's going on with you, buddy?
Not too much, buddy. It's good to be here. We've been trying to line this up for a little while, and we finally were able to make it happen. You called me the Undroppables content manager, which was very nice because I've also been called the nagging wife of the Undroppables. And Jax recently on our show called me the Undroppables dishwasher, which I wasn't too stoked about.
Wow.
So we ended that bit right there. Although Jax kept it going in private channels, but yeah, it was a funny little bit. But content manager, I will take it, and I'm super happy to be here with you guys because you two, for me, are definitely two of the hardest working guys in fantasy football. I can't count anymore how many shows you guys are on. It's probably up to like 10, 15 weeklies. So just cool to see. Feeling very lucky to have you guys as part of the Undroppables team as well. And I know all the other brands that you work for are super lucky to have you as well, fellas. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Those are kind words. I guess that makes Grindberg the bus boy, and I'll just be the Mitchell D.
Yeah,
it's not often in my life where I wind up the minority, but I am the only non-America's hat national here. So this is a special Canadian edition, if you will.
Yeah, and we're talking nothing but hockey today. So buckle up, and we are talking. Actually, we're talking about some football here, guys. And
is this hockey?
It is, man.
Is that hockey?
And that's quite the team there, actually. The Winnipeg Jets, first in the league. But we won't talk about my home team. We'll talk about some fantasy football. And we had some great showings from this rookie class, and we're going to deep dive into pretty much every position and take out the standouts at everyone. Break it down a little bit. I'm going to kind of probe my homies here a little bit about these guys. And we're going to
Mike loves probing.
I do. And we're going to start with none other than the prolific Jayden Daniels. His rookie season with the Commanders was nothing short of spectacular. He solidified his status as the league's most promising young quarterbacks. 70% completion rate almost. He threw for 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, and only 9 interceptions across 16 games of fantasy football. His dual threat ability was on full display. 864 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns. He's a top tier fantasy asset. It's undeniable at this stage. So, Trav, given his breakout rookie campaign, how do you project his 2025 value? Should fantasy managers expect to continue growth in his passing stats, or his rushing upside? Will it remain his primary fantasy factor?
Yeah, I think the rushing is obviously going to be always the key factor with Jayden Daniels. I think that's what's always going to give him that ultimate ceiling. I think for me, he's already in the top 5 as far as dynasty quarterbacks. Still got a little bit of refining to do on those dynasty ranks, but I would firmly say that he's in the top 5, if not up into the top 3. And we saw a lot of the reasons why this season, right? He was a top 12 quarterback in 12 of 15 weeks this season. 5 times did he have 30+ point performances. And so we just kind of saw that ultimate ceiling that came along with the rushing, which was really nice. But yeah, the passing was a nice little surprise there as well. It was very efficient. Some of the touchdown increase that we saw late in the season as well. 3 of his past 4, did he have 3+ touchdowns, including 5 touchdowns against my Birds boys. That one hurt real bad. And I think the cool thing about it is that there is some room for improvement for Jayden Daniels as well in the passing department. He only threw for 220 yards per game. Average depth of target, deep throw percentage were all outside of the top 25, so for some room to improve there. And you said it, Mike, the 25 touchdowns, some room to grow there as well. We saw some prolific passing numbers in college from him at LSU, and we saw some of that translate into the NFL, but I think there is room for him to positively regress to the point where we see a better season than the, I think, quarterback 4 year we saw this season. So I am wheels up all in on Jayden Daniels. I was previously as well, but do have to admit to a little bit of cowardice with Jayden Daniels, fellas. Early in the offseason process last year, I was staunch in the camp of Jayden Daniels, quarterback one. I feel like I was a bit of a coward and kind of succumbed to the masses and ended up having Caleb Williams as my quarterback one by the end of the evaluation process. But I really just wish I would have stuck with Jayden, because I think that's where my heart still lied. But I was just being a little bit of a wuss and not planting that flag a little bit more firmly.
Yeah, if there's anything that I did over the 2023 and 2024 years, it was plant that flag. And Jayden Daniels in his 2023 season was historic. He had a top 4 season of all time in college football. Among the names with Jayden Daniels were Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, who we know coming out in college, they had absolutely incredible years. I have a tweet. I can be counted on for data-driven, unhinged bullshit. That's what you can expect from me, right? And so I'm going to come at you with a couple of receipts. I got some tweets here that I want to read. The first one is from July 21st of 2024. Jayden Daniels is Anthony Richardson without the passing concerns and inexperience. If you're drafting him lower this year than you were drafting AR last year, you're doing it wrong. Period. Another one. Not mad that I have Jayden Daniels in the Devy League. It goes on. So we saw him coming. We knew Jayden Daniels was going to be huge. We have some shows where we were recapping our 2024 takes, and Grindberg's out here with his bold predictions, calling Jayden Daniels a top 5 quarterback, and he nailed it. And like Travis said, things are just going to get better. He had Terry McLaurin. He had a geriatric Zach Ertz, De'Ami Brown, and Olamide Zaccheaus. They got rid of Jahan Dotson. What happens? We know Adam Peters is a genius GM, obviously, because he drafted Jayden Daniels. But what happens when Adam Peters goes out and starts to uncover some wide receivers from this 2025 class, which is pretty damn deep? What happens when you have a guy like Ben Sinnott, who starts to ascend at tight end? What happens when you have a running game in Brian Robinson that can keep the defense honest? Jayden Daniels and his rushing upside and his arm and his passing touchdown proclivities are only going to smash. I see Lamar Jackson as QB1 in Jayden Daniels' future, and I'm all in on him in Dynasty. He's the dude.
Yeah, I think to point to that Lamar Jackson kind of touch you had there, Jayden Daniels ran for about 7.5 fantasy points per game this year just with his legs, which was more than Lamar Jackson, just less than Josh Allen, who had more than, or I think double the touchdowns that Jayden Daniels did. So
right.
He is like a Lamar Jackson incarnate. I don't think he necessarily has the passing prowess that we saw yet from Lamar this season, because that was astronomical. But I have to throw this out there for you boys. The one thing that I'm a little bit worried about, and I've kind of preached this a little bit since my time joining the Undroppables, was he's got the vaunted defensive head coach, innovative offensive coordinator combo right now. And it's nice because Cliff Kingsbury is a great offensive coordinator, has done wonders for Jayden Daniels. But as we know, those guys always leave when they're looking for head coaching jobs. Always, us fantasy gamers just say, put the OC in as the head coach. Never happens that way. And when these guys leave, sometimes there's a bit of a revolving door that can make a mess of these young quarterback situations, especially the rushing quarterbacks. So that's my only concern, is that if Cliff Kingsbury leaves, and he's obviously looking for the next head coaching opportunity to come, what does the offensive coordinator situation look like there in Washington? I think the hope is just that the new hire isn't an idiot, and that Jayden himself maybe can just transcend the need to have that specific offensive scheme. But I'm just a little bit worried that nurturing process isn't yet complete.
Yeah, and we saw with Cliff Kingsbury what happened with Kyler Murray in his first few years. The thing, though, is especially if you want to start getting into Lamar Jackson comps, we have Todd Monken in Baltimore right now, and Lamar Jackson has gone through his share of defensive first head coach in John Harbaugh, who's been there for his entire career, and run first head coach in John Harbaugh, or
good point,
in Greg Roman. So the thing about Lamar is that he transcends. The other thing is that he's been in the league for 6 years. Let's see what Jayden Daniels is as a complete product in 6 years. I saw this 2024 QB class being Drake May, analogous to Josh Allen, and Jayden Daniels being analogous to Lamar Jackson. Let's see where that's at in 2030.
Interesting.
I am ready for it.
All right, let's move on to a lesser of a quarterback at this stage, and somebody that was, touted as the guy. We you mentioned it, Trav, earlier. Caleb Williams, his rookie season was, showed some promising flashes, but significant challenges, highlighted by a league high 67 sacks through 17 games. Despite the brutal pressure on him, Williams handled it with some maturity, refusing to blame his offensive line for the struggles, but he did take responsibility for some of those sacks themselves. But, up and down season, 62% completion rate, 3,400 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 87% passer rating, not great, while the sacks and pressure have him hindered his development. What do you think here, bigz? You weren't high on him headed into this draft because of this situation. Given the extreme amount of pressure on Caleb Williams and what he's faced his rookie season, do you think 2025's outlook, what is it for Caleb Williams?
Let's backtrack a little bit. It's not that I wasn't high on Caleb Williams' talent. I was not high on Caleb Williams progressing as a rookie quarterback. Caleb Williams, as long as we're talking about comps, we've got Jayden Daniels as Lamar Jackson. We got Drake May as Josh Allen. I'm going Caleb Williams as Patrick Mahomes. There are things that Caleb Williams does with the football that other people don't. Whether that's due to like physical talents or whatever, it reminds me a lot of Patrick Mahomes. But in his rookie season, we have things like Rome Odunze with 101 targets and 54 catches. That's right around a 50% non-catchable ball rate. We have Keenan Allen, 121 targets with 70 receptions. That's less than 70%. That's right in the 60% range. We have DJ Moore, 140 targets, 98 receptions. That was the best of the group, and that's still in like the 65% range. So there's something about Caleb Williams and his ball delivery that is not getting into the hands of his receivers. And it's not a situation like Kyler Murray where he can see Trey McBride and hit him every time, but he can't see Marvin Harrison Jr. and he's got a 50% catch rate. This is something that Caleb Williams needs to do with his accuracy, and it's something that is going to develop over time. We just talked about Lamar Jackson and his passing prowess as a 6th-year guy. We can go all the way back 25 years ago. Rich Gannon was a journeyman 8th-year quarterback that came out and won an MVP for the Oakland Raiders. We have Baker Mayfield and his ascension. We have Sam Darnold, who kicked around the league similar to Baker Mayfield and just came out and had a career year with the Minnesota Vikings. So there is a bright future ahead for Caleb Williams. It just didn't happen in his rookie season. So I love Caleb Williams. I love him at his value. You can find a guy that drafted him in the top 5 of his rookie draft that is like, I don't like the year that I just saw from Caleb Williams, and exploit that. And that's what I am prepared to do over the next 6 months in my dynasty leagues. I love Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I'm still holding firm too, bigz. I just think yeah, sorry, man, to jump in there, but I just think there's a reason we evaluated him as highly as we did, right? There's a reason why we loved the situation that he came into with the receivers that were around him. One thing that we didn't account for was absolute dog shit play calling and coaching. And so I think that's going to be a very, very important piece of the puzzle for Caleb Williams. Like, play calling to me is one of the most important pieces when I look to project these guys forward. And you want these innovative guys in there. I was talking about Cliff Kingsbury. He's a great one to attach to. And just kind of looking for that history and what they do with these guys. Like, one thing I like is early down passing. The Bears weren't a huge early down passing team, not a ton of play action. Caleb Williams was kind of middle to low pack as far as dropbacks and play action. And then they didn't run very much RPO as well. He had 21 RPO dropbacks on all the entire season. So they just didn't really do much to move him around and get him in good situations. They kind of relied on kind of the players around him to transcend a terrible scheme and some terrible play calling. So I think that's going to be really important to see who the hire is and who comes in for these guys. I've heard a little bit of talk about Pete Carroll, not necessarily an innovative offensive guy, but he's a guy who's been able to bring people in. I'm not sure he was running high flying offenses in Seattle, so he would bring me a little bit of question. But if they get one of these young guys who is the offensive coordinator, kind of looks like a long shot, but maybe like a Ben Johnson type, I would like that for Caleb Williams. He could grow with this guy. He's not going to have that revolving door that we talked about, and he still does have some really nice weaponry around him. So can't deny what the scenery looks like around Caleb Williams if they put an offensive line around him. And so I'm thinking that it could be a big bounce back, could be a little bit of a buying window for us Dynasty gamers, especially because he's going to be a lot cheaper than he was last offseason when he was kind of the unanimous Superflex 101. So I'm with you, bigz. I'm still in. I might have a little bit more hesitation, maybe a little bit less personal love for the man, I guess, from tracking him. But yeah, I mean, the upside is definitely there. The ceiling is definitely there. We talked recently on our show, Dynasty Underground, about some of these other guys who have top 5 upside along with Jayden Daniels. Drake May was next in line, but Caleb Williams was not far behind. So yeah, I think that's in his realm of possibilities still.
Well, let's dig into a couple things real quick. Number one is Pete Carroll. Now, there are some names being bandied about, and I think the 3 top jobs that are in the space right now are the Patriots. That looks like Vrabel's job. The Raiders. I'm hoping for Ben Johnson and
top job.
I hope. And Pete Carroll just interviewed with the Bears, or at least scheduled it. So think of if Pete Carroll goes to the Bears. The guy knows how to build a franchise, and on top of that, who did he create into a Super Bowl winning quarterback? And that's Russell Wilson. What is Russell Wilson's stock and trade? Running around in the pocket or outside of the pocket and throwing the ball downfield. And what does Caleb Williams do well? Creating on the go and throwing the ball downfield. It does result in a lower than average catchable ball rate because he's throwing such wild throws. He's making such wild decisions. But if Caleb Williams can rein that in a little bit, make better throws, which comes with time, Pete Carroll could turn Caleb Williams into a Super Bowl champion. How crazy is that to think about? The other thing is we talk about Caleb Williams coming to a good landing spot in Chicago because of the weapons around him, but sometimes the narrative outweighs the reality. It's a signal versus noise thing, and the noise was Caleb Williams' potential talent level. The signal was he's coming into a terrible situation with Eberflus and Shane Waldron, and they're not gonna put him in the best situation to succeed. If you have a young quarterback and you are not throwing the ball in ideal situations, you're creating panic, and a young guy who's still learning the league against adult guys that are the biggest, strongest, fastest guys on the planet, that's not a recipe for success. So moving forward, there's nothing but upside for Caleb Williams.
Also, a little bit of a USC connection there with Pete Carroll's old team that he coached, and Caleb Williams coming out of USC as well. So there probably were some connections made in Caleb's time at USC.
Yeah, and you know, and my dad always thanks Pete Carroll for making Tom Brady another Super Bowl quarterback champion. So there's that as well. So let's move on to another situation here that we got to talk about, and that's Bo Nix. And you know, I could be talking about Drake May because he was drafted ahead, but we got to talk about Bo Nix because he finished ahead of Drake May, even though he played less games. But I'm just saying that Bo Nix rookie season with the Broncos, what a season he had. It's starting the growth, the challenging environment that he had. He still threw for 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, 12 interceptions and leading the Broncos to a 9-7 record, after 16 games, and, positioning them on the brink of a playoff. And now they're in there, and now they have a tough situation ahead of them. But, Bo Nix, his leadership, his ability to improve each week, and his potential in Sean Payton's system makes him an intriguing option moving forward, even if the inconsistencies of turnovers remain a concern. So, Trav, while Bo Nix, he's shown significant growth his rookie season, do you think his 2025 outlook will continue to improve in, this Broncos system around him? Those turnovers, growing pains, they've become an issue, but I mean, he's still become a top tier quarterback at this stage.
Yeah, I think oftentimes with fantasy assets, especially people that we drafted in Dynasty, we get attached through our heart, right? We get our heartstrings attached. And I think sometimes what that causes us to do is set unrealistic expectations. And I think Bo Nix, where he's a little bit opposite of that, is I think he far exceeded the expectations that we had coming out of rookie drafts. We didn't know if it would be him even starting. There was talk of Jarrett Stidham starting over him, which is hilarious to look back and think on. Imagine if they did that. But
Raiders legend.
Yeah, Raiders legend, Jarrett Stidham. That is right. Take a bow. But yeah, he definitely exceeded those expectations that we had. But I think what we got to do now is make sure that our expectations for him now don't get too out of hand, right? Because I think what we saw this season is probably the ceiling of what we should be expecting in any given year, finishing right around the quarterback 10. He doesn't present mega rushing upside, which is what's going to bring him up into that upper echelon. So I think right around how he finished this year is what we can expect from him. I could see maybe a little bump into that, 7 to 10 range, as opposed to the 10 to 12 finish on any given season. Like I said, doesn't really use the rushing as a weapon, but he has been able to use it in nice situations. And I think he's above average as a pocket passer too, right? He had 6 games this year that gave you 3+ points as a runner, which was nice. And then we saw some of that good stuff as far as a passer, poise in the pocket, making good decisions down the stretch, leading the team. Like, I was impressed by that, how much command he was able to take of that offense and kind of lead these guys forward. So signs are pointing up for Bo Nix for me. And I think some of those other things, that depth chart at wide receiver was not that great. They tried to work some guys in and out. We saw Marvin Mims towards the end of the season look pretty good, but I think there's some jobs to be had there. And just more pieces that could be put around him, right? Like Sean Payton's done this before. This is where you start to put the pieces around the young quarterback who is attached to an absolutely elite defense. And this is one of those teams that, not a big Sean Payton fan, but could be contending for the Super Bowl within that rookie contract of Bo Nix's. And I think that's just a massive advantage for any team to be able to do that. So after the gaffe that the Denver Broncos had with the Russell Wilson contract, I think they have recovered mighty nicely. To quote one of my favorite movies of all time, totally redeemed themselves.
I love Aspen.
Yeah.
I love California. I'm going to jump in here because as an AFC West patron, and I know Grindberg feels my pain too. I'm just this is the comps show. I'm running with comps tonight. I'm gonna read you a list of quarterback finishes in PPR: 14, 12, 19, 20, 17, 14, 13, 17, 16. So we're talking about the 12 to 15 finish range in PPR at the quarterback position. That's not the most ideal. It's better than Will Levis. But this, we're talking about quarterback 3. All right. So you're drafting this guy as like your QB3. He's not going to be in your starting lineup, but if he has a good matchup in your bye week, you're going to throw him in there. All right. That's Bo Nix. Except I'm not talking about Bo Nix. I'm talking about Derek Carr. Now take those QB finishes and the similar year-long statistics of 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and add 300 to 400 yards rushing on top of that. That's Bo Nix. Bo Nix is Derek Carr plus 300 yards rushing per season. That's going to get you into the top 12 conversation as a fantasy finisher. That's going to give you some upside of top 8 finish. I like Bo Nix, and I hate that so much. But Bo Nix is Derek Carr plus 400 yards per season rushing upside. There you go.
Yeah.
430 on the season he had as a rookie.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it just creeps up on you like nothing there, and it'll continue to happen, it seems. So another guy who's got a lot of rushing upside, and he's shown a lot of flashes his rookie season, and that's Drake May. He had over his 11 starts in fantasy football, he thrown for over 2,300 yards, 15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, almost a 70% completion rate, 68%. That's pretty impressive considering when you look at the weapons that he had around him. Finished as QB 19 since week 4. Gradual improvements. His decision making overall game leaves you, optimistic about his situation in New England. And with, they have some draft capital, ample cap space. They're going to add some weapons around him that, including the offensive line, that's going to need some improvements as well. His future looks promising. If the team can surround him with more talent, he could blossom into a legitimate QB1. We've seen his rushing upside, so bigz, his steady rookie performance, and the Patriots' promising future. How do you see his 2025 fantasy outlook?
That totally depends on what the new regime in New England does as far as roster construction. Now, all of you guys who are watching this show right now obviously watched the other show where we had Chev on and Coach Retzlaff and Schultze was with us.
Shout out.
And I talked about the fact that Chev and I host a show on Player Profiler every Friday, 4 p.m. Don't miss it. It's Player Profiler today, and it's not fantasy related. It's basically matchups of in season and the injury reports, right? Throughout the season, every time we got to a New England game, I would read the injury designations and I would list off 12 to 15 players, and usually 5 to 8 of them were offensive linemen. If Drake May can have his organization create an offensive line in front of him that is competent and healthy, he will be able to cook. Now, preseason, I jumped into the fray and I comped Drake May to Josh Allen, and there was a reason for that. I told you it's data-driven, unhinged bullshit. In Drake May's sophomore year at North Carolina, he had similar numbers to Josh Allen's year in Buffalo in fewer games. That kind of play style, the things that Drake May brings to the table are along the lines of a matured Josh Allen. He's doing that in college. It transfers well to the NFL. And who was he doing it with at North Carolina? Tez Walker? Is it Jahan Dotson? Was he a North Carolina wide receiver? Who was on the North Carolina Tar Heels as a wide receiver? So the fact that he did it this year, similar kind of profile, but he was doing it with Hunter Henry at tight end, Demario Douglas, Pop Douglas at the slot receiver, Javon Baker doing nothing, Jalen Polk doing nothing. Once that team gets built around him, which is, some people like me like to build the team and then drop a quarterback in. Some people think that it's better to get your quarterback and then build the team around him. Let's hope that's the New England Patriots style. And then the future is just wild for Drake May. We keep talking about the future. We keep talking about comps. Let's see where Drake May is in 5 years from now. In 2030, we're talking Drake May as a legitimate top 10 quarterback in this league based on his skill set and his physical profile. I love the future for the Patriots. And that's another thing I hate to say. Why are the Broncos and Patriots getting so good right now? They're supposed to be down.
Well, Patriots got a little ways to go, big, so I don't think you should be counting those chickens necessarily yet. So there's still some room for them to.
I hate chickens
as well. Yeah, chicken is delicious.
Josh Downs, that's who I meant, not Jahan Dotson.
Yeah, right. I was going to say Penn State for Dotson, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think all of those things that you said were really good. They need an offensive line that's not made out of cardboard, and they actually need some capable wide receivers around him. I was talking to Mr. Joe Kuvatakis from the Undroppables on our show Dynasty Underground last night. And the Patriots had one of the worst wide receiver groups in the league. I think it's easy to see that just by looking on paper, but when you look at the numbers, it bears out too. Their leader in fantasy points per game was Pop Douglas. He had 8.7 fantasy points per game on the season. No other team's leader in points per game had fewer than 10 PPR points per game. And so nasty lows for that wide receiver room. Put out a fun fact on Twitter the other day that bigz, I don't think you thought was necessarily all that fun, but of all wide receivers who ran more than 200 routes, Jaylen Polk had the fewest receiving yards on the season. Over 230 routes. He only had 87 receiving yards on the season. One of only 2 guys to be under 100 yards. And he is in the prestigious company of Mason Tipton in that category. So it was really bad. And it hurt my heartstrings too, because I was ready to go with Jaylen Polk, ready to go with Javon Baker, not quite as ready to go with Drake May coming into the situation that he was in. And so I think we've kind of flipped the script a little bit, where Drake May did, and I'm with you on that Josh Allen comp. Like, he's a wild man back there, and it's fucking awesome to watch. And I do see those similarities because Josh Allen didn't have much for weaponry when he came into the league as well. And so that was a big question. Questions about him leading an offense, and boy, did he throw that in our face. And so Drake May is ready to do that. The team just has to do something around him, like what the Bills did with Josh Allen, to make him able to kind of, or something, right? Like, you're picking at 4, get yourself a Ted McMillan and a T Higgins, or even think of a Keenan Allen and what he could do for a rookie quarterback like this as he hits the free agent market. I don't think Keenan Allen's going there because he probably wants a ring, but at the same time, like, you've got to bring some leadership into that pass catching group. And Ted McMillan in the draft, or whoever you get in the draft, just isn't enough. I think they need a veteran presence as well.
Well, if we can even look at their historic analytics, we can look at the unscore. Everybody should be familiar with the unscore. Go to the undroppables.com and get the unscore. Javon Baker and Jaylen Polk, they weren't terrible as far as unscore is concerned. There are 10, 15 players who were supposed to be worse than those 2 guys. I'm one of the few that had Jalen McMillan over Jaylen Polk simply because of 2022 versus 2023 performance. But still liked Jaylen Polk to a certain extent coming out of college. Javon Baker, I really, really liked, and I'm just shocked at the performance. If they add a guy like T Higgins and don't do too much and allow those 2 guys to develop over the next couple of years, we're talking third-year breakouts in 2027, I want to say. But I do want to take this moment to talk to Joe Kuvatakis. This is yours, buddy. This is your Brandon Cooks signed mini helmet that you won at the Fantasy Football Expo, and it's been sitting on my desk since I got home from the Expo in August, and you're supposed to come to Davis and pick it up. Bro.
You could probably just throw it out.
Where are you at? I'll keep it on my desk.
You can probably just throw that out.
There you go. I'd
rather have Joe come and not give it to him.
This is the signed mini.
Come hang out, buddy.
You need. This is the signed mini helmet that you need. That's a Brian Dawkins right there, baby.
That's dope as fuck. I'll say it.
Let's go. All right.
I said, oh, I have a Jalen Mills autographed jersey.
I love Jalen Mills. I loved him when he was like the swag that he brought to that that defensive backfield. Like, that was a shit defensive backfield. Oh, I bet it's beautiful. And they had nothing. All they had was Jalen Mills' swag, and that rode me most of that season, buddy.
So that was courtesy of Fantasy Cares and their 25 Days of Christmas in last year. And nice. I won it from the random drawing. And the day before, they gave away a Devontae Adams Raiders jersey. The next day, I won a Jalen Mills Eagles jersey.
Some consolation.
That's how it works.
It's okay.
As he takes a drink.
Yeah. All right.
No, I like Jalen Mills too. Even though he wasn't, like, no affiliation to the Eagles, I loved Jalen Mills.
Yeah. LSU Tiger.
Yeah, that's closer. So actually, I have a Randy Moss jersey. His son played for LSU. Jamar Chase, LSU. Jalen Mills, LSU. Let's go. Go Tigers.
Tell us something, bigz.
Yeah, I'm an LSU fan.
Do we want to touch on Michael Penix before we head on to the wide receivers? I mean,
I don't want to touch a Penix.
All right, let's move on then. I think
I already touched a couple today.
Yeah,
I've already touched enough Penixes today.
There we go. We've hit enough Penixes, and we're gonna move on to Brian Thomas Jr. Then, what a season he had, despite playing in what a challenging environment that was. He finished with 80 receptions, 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns in the 16 fantasy games, 14.7 yards per catch. His standout performance in the final stretch of the season, we documented it, quite a bit last week, bigz, as one of our MVPs, if not one of the MVPs at the wide receiver position, despite playing with the likes of Mac Jones. He earned double-digit targets in each of his final 5 games, scoring 4 touchdowns over his last 3 weeks. His impressive 33% target share and 29% air yard share, along with his ability to generate big plays, including a 40-yard touchdown on that last, week 17 game, solidified his reign as, a true top tier asset in fantasy. Trevor Lawrence set to return next year, and he's poised for significant improvements. So is this the ceiling, the floor? Where do we stand here with Brian Thomas Jr., Trav? His incredible finish in his rookie season. He's expected to have Trevor Lawrence back. So could he make a leap into the, top 8 dynasty wide receivers, or is he already there for you?
He's already there, baby. And I don't know if this is the ceiling. I don't know if this is the floor, but I think this is the norm now for Brian Thomas Jr. Slots in as my wide receiver 7, Grindberg. So right behind Malik Nabers and AJ Brown, right in front of Garrett Wilson and Puka Nacua. I just think that garbage quarterback play that we saw him do it with this season is a huge factor, because we thought that was going to tank him, but he was able to do it without that, and I think that's for me why he's in front of Puka Nacua just on the ranking side, because we haven't seen Puka Nacua do it without an elite quarterback in Matt Stafford. And so I think Puka Nakua's arrow might end up trending downward, where Brian Thomas's arrow still trends upwards for me. Just taking a look at that rookie season, it was just historic. His 1,200 yards or whatever the exact number was is top 10 all time for a rookie wide receiver. He's the first rookie ever to have 1,000 receiving yards and 10 receiving touchdowns in the same season. So that's pretty fantastic. 31 rookie wide receivers overall have reached 1,000 yards. He's one of them. Just incredible work from Brian Thomas. He left a little bit of meat on the bone. We were talking about that with I can't remember who earlier, but there was still a lot of room for improvement. And I think some better quarterback play could achieve that for him. He was outside the top 20 in target share with 23.2% this year. Number 14 in air yards, which is still fantastic, but I think his profile lends itself to being like yearly top 3 in air yards, which obviously presents a little bit more upside as well. And then his first read target share was outside the top 25 as well. And I am 99.9% sure that is going to go up a big amount. I could see him being one of those guys who takes 25 to 30% of the targets on a yearly basis, especially when some of the dust clears named Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis. Get those guys out of there, get him a nice complementary second weapon. And if Trevor Lawrence doesn't work out, keep trying to find that quarterback. And I think we've got ourselves like a top 5 wide receiver for me in Dynasty. So yeah, all in on Brian Thomas Jr. I was there on him last season as well. I said he was my wide receiver 4 among those rookies, and I thought he was closer to that top tier than he was to the tier behind him. So felt good to get a little validation where that was concerned, but it felt even better to get that fantasy production on my Dynasty teams.
Yeah, Brian Thomas Jr. is the guy that made me go back and look at my analysis and go, where did I miss? Where did I miss this guy? Because everything that I saw on tape, everything that I saw in analytics, nothing pointed to this happening with him as a receiver. And you said something about left meat on the bone. There were at least 3 drops that I saw him have in the end zone, not just the red zone, in the end zone, that were catchable balls that just hit off his hands. And that's 21 points added to his season total, right? That gets cleaned up. His first read target share gets cleaned up. It increases as moving forward, the Jaguars realize that they have an absolute dog. His usage in college was not relative to what he's been used for as an NFL wide receiver. That points to a blind spot in our analysis where we can look at a guy at his 3-year college career, 4-year college career, 5-year college career, and think, what has this guy done? Well, this is his yards per reception. This is his yards after catch per reception. These are the first downs per reception. And when you have a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., who's in a wide receiver room that includes Malik Nabers, his usage might differ from his actual physical ability to perform on an NFL level. And that's exactly what we saw in the NFL in 2024. Brian Thomas Jr. exceeded all expectations. I'm not going to go as far as to say that Travis is the only one that was high on Brian Thomas Jr., but I will say that everybody that missed on Brian Thomas Jr. had good reason to miss on him, because there was not anything that pointed to this dude is that guy. Now, he is that guy. So we have to completely adjust for 2025. And I would slot him in just behind Malik, then Puka, then Brian Thomas Jr., simply because of what the Rams are going to do with Puka. So that's our only point of disagreement right there is where I rank Puka and Brian Thomas Jr. That's pretty slim, right? We both have Malik ahead of both of those guys.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's splitting hairs at that point. Brian Thomas Jr. also does, well, you know what? You're making me rethink it. Damn it, Travis, because Brian Thomas Jr. doesn't have the injury history that Puka has. And Matthew Stafford is aging out as a quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is still yet to reach his potential.
I think Trevor Lawrence or not, right? It doesn't really matter because Trevor Lawrence was a shite quarterback this year,
right. And he was
playing with Mac Jones. And then if you look at the Puka thing, it's not dogging Puka Nacua. He had the best rookie season of any wide receiver of all time, but that is likely the best season he will ever have for the rest of his career because that's an elite season, rookie or not. And so I just really think that like you could sell Puka for Brian Thomas plus easy right now, and I would fucking do that all day. And then when you look at the Rams, a counter to the Stafford argument could be McVay, but could you not both see McVay just getting out of town when Stafford does and maybe taking a year off and then finding a new job or something like that because his Rams tenure has maybe run its course and he doesn't want to do another retool? Maybe that could happen. So I just think there's a lot more uncertainty in Puka Nacua's future that we haven't seen him operate under, where we've seen Brian Thomas operate under uncertainty. And so any certainty that can be attached to him is just kind of cherry on top of, I was trying to put together cherry on top and icing on the cake at the same time. And I just didn't know how to put that one together. Yeah. It's cherry on the icing cake and shit.
There you go.
The only element that I think Sean McVay brings to it is that I think Sean McVay's ego is such that he would, I think he would want to win another one with the Rams. So he thinks enough of himself that he thinks that he could go out and get a quarterback that could do it again, the same kind of way that he scuttled Goff because of Stafford, even though in their Super Bowl years, those two guys were essentially the same statistically. I think McVay thinks that he can do it again, as Stafford is incapable of being that guy. I think he thinks he can grab somebody in free agency or make a trade and run it back. And he wants to do it again in LA. I mean, LA is a pretty good draw. Not today. Nobody wants to be in LA today.
No. Shout out to all those people, eh?
Yeah. Love you in SoCal and hope you're all safe. But I think McVay wants to do it again there before he moves on. I mean, Jeff Fisher was, he was the poster boy for futility. Mike Tomlin is similar, where they need to do it for that franchise, and I think he sticks around. Whether or not he gets the guy that can make Puka the top 4 guy that he we feel that he has a talent level to do as long as he stays healthy and has the right situation. That remains to be seen, but I think McVay will be there for a while.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's move on to Malik Nabers then, guys, because he was a guy that we all, as undroppables were really, really high on headed into this season. And, there's no doubting that incredible rookie season that he had, only playing 14 fantasy games. He totaled 104 receptions, 1,200 yards, almost 6 touchdowns, 11 yards per catch. He posted a strong production, scoring 204 fantasy points, averaging 14.6 per game, ranking as one of the top rookie wide receivers. We know that he finished in the top 10. His route yards per route run was great. His first down per route run highlighted his ability for meaningful games. What a good situation he's in moving forward, because they're going to bring in some sort of quarterback help. He's essentially quarterback proof at this stage. So bigz, given his exceptional rookie season and his impressive rookie performance, despite playing under that suboptimal offensive environment, do you see him as a breakout wide receiver 1 in 2025, undisputed at this stage?
Not necessarily wide receiver 1. There's a lot of movement in the top 4 wide receivers. So if you look back to the last few years, we have Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua. And it's ironic that we were just talking about Puka Nacua, because I'm pretty sure I have a tweet out there that says, who's this year's Puka Nacua? And that's Malik Nabers. I
don't know if he would be this year's Puka Nacua. He was a first-round draft pick, and Puka Nacua was undrafted.
Well, no. I meant simply because of Puka Nacua setting the rookie wide receiver receptions.
Who's got the ultimate ceiling?
Right. Who's going to break Puka's record is what I said. And I certainly didn't see Brock Bowers doing it. But as far as wide receivers go, I imagined that Malik Nabers would be the one that broke Puka's rookie wide receiver record. You asked in a show a few weeks ago about Malik Nabers versus Brian Thomas Jr. And I distinctly have Malik Nabers ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. I cannot say with any amount of certainty that he will be a wide receiver 1, but I can almost guarantee that he's going to be in the wide receiver top 5 conversation every year. Like I said, there's a lot of movement in there. CeeDee Lamb was the incumbent wide receiver 1 coming into the year and dealt with injuries and to himself and to the quarterback position, finished outside of that wide receiver 1 spot. Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson 2 years ago in 2023, they were the big conversation. Justin Jefferson was going to be that guy, and everybody who was trying to find that edge said it's going to be Jamar Chase. Well, Jamar Chase finished ahead, but Justin Jefferson did it in the playoffs. So that's a very nebulous kind of thing to stick on a player. But I think Malik Nabers is now in the conversation every single year for that, because look at his spot with the New York Giants. There is no way they can have worse quarterback play than what they saw this year. And you saw how that offense is oriented towards not just Malik Nabers, but what Malik Nabers does when that offense is veering away from him. When they're trying to run the ball, Malik Nabers is still there, getting open. When they're trying to focus on Wandale, Malik Nabers is still there, getting open. Theo Johnson, first look, Malik Nabers is still there when Theo's covered. Malik Nabers is going to be that dude for at least the foreseeable future. If you draft him in the top 5 of wide receivers, I have zero qualms where you take him. Now, we talked a lot, and I do want to say that Grindberg knows, and Jax is a dude, and Jax made his flag plant very early that he had Malik over Marvin Harrison Jr. And Grindberg knows that before Jax ever said that, I said that too. I just want to say that. So Jax and I have been on the same page from the get-go. Malik Nabers is the wide receiver 1 out of this class, and he is absolutely a top 4 wide receiver in all of the NFL at this point.
I actually have him as my wide receiver 5 because the name that I have in there is actually Amon-Ra St. Brown. Very maybe not definitely a contrasting style, different style than the other guys, right? There's Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, your, typical alphas. And then Amon-Ra is not that, but
and different lineups too. Like he lines up in different spots too.
Yeah. And he's just ultimate volume eater. And I love to see that. So yeah, no, I think any of these guys that are even in the top 10 have the potential of finishing as the wide receiver 1 in any given year. And so it's all just, making sure you try and find that guy and try and find the guy that you can get at the value, right? Depending on where you're drafting, are you taking a shot on that guy to potentially make that bump, or are you drafting that guy at his ceiling, right? Because sometimes in your early picks, you are going to potentially draft guys at the ceilings, but as you get into 3, 4, 5, 6, you want to see those guys who can vault into that first round value the following year. So yeah, Nabers is unreal. He's going to be a first round draft pick.
And still draft 2 of those guys before you get a running back.
Depends how you're building. I think you can build either way. I've been historically a running back heavy guy, bigz, which is why I say that. And I will defend that, play style until the day that I die, but I can't, I play with 3 wide receiver leagues as well, just like all of you guys do. And I have lots of 0 RB teams that have succeeded just like all you guys do. So it's fun to try out the different ways as well. Early in my fantasy playing career, I got way too locked in running back heavy. And over the last 6 years since I've been making content, I've gotten a lot more open to playing in different ways, and it's just more fun, and more fun is good.
I'm typically an anchor guy, and I got locked up by Travis Etienne and Breece Hall. So now I'm back to 0 RB because Saquon and Derek can't do it forever.
All right, let's move on, guys, and let's talk about McConkey. And, we all had him pegged as a breakout candidate this year, but I don't know if any of us really imagined what he really did. 15 games, 77 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, proving himself as a consistent, reliable target. McConkey's outstanding yards per route run, 2.53 and 0.117 first down per route run, highlight his ability to generate efficient and productive plays, making him a standout among the rookies. Despite battling knee and shoulder injuries, he broke Keenan Allen's rookie record for receptions and yards, and his 9-game streak of 50-plus receiving yards further solidifies his place among the league's promising young talents, with the future looking even brighter in year 2. Trav, given his, stellar rookie campaign, his metrics, what do you see his future with Justin Herbert? And do you see him emerging as a top 15 wide receiver in Dynasty?
I think for me, probably not quite into the top 15. Now, that's not to say that he can't have top 15 seasons. A few times throughout his career, we saw that this year, wide receiver 13, I believe he finished as. But I do think it has been a bit of a perfect storm in that offense with no other wide receivers emerging. Do love Lad from a real football perspective, and I think the role that he's commanded in Los Angeles has been great. But I do think there is a little bit of a cap to his play style. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who's getting a ton of deep targets. You know what I mean? He only had 9 on the season, and I think that would be an additional boost to see him get into that top 15. And I don't necessarily think he's going to be necessarily a huge touchdown guy year over year. I wouldn't predict him to be a guy who can give me 10 touchdowns in any given season. I would say double-digit touchdowns would be more of a pleasant surprise for Lad. So I think for those reasons, there's a little bit of trepidation on that top 15, where I see a lot of other people going all in on that, but can't deny what he did this season, right? I said 31 rookies had hit 1,000 yards previously when we were talking about Brian Thomas Jr. Lad is one of those. I think for me, his kind of downfield work, I said he's not going to be a downfield guy, but I was impressed with what he did have by way of average depth of target, air yards, better than I expected. So I really liked what was there. Just what I mentioned earlier, we got to set those expectations, right? Because he's not a profile of guy that's going to be repetitively in that top 10, top 5 of fantasy wide receivers. We have to be happy with him as our wide receiver 2 on our roster, as one of those 15 to 24 kind of guys for Dynasty.
I think it's interesting that you say that, given the fact that you talked about Amon-Ra St. Brown being your wide receiver 4, simply because they remind me of each other. And if there's anything that we can talk about in the rookie class as far as analytics transferring almost carbon copy to the NFL, it's Ladd McConkey and what he did at Georgia, albeit on a very limited snap share into the NFL. Brian Thomas Jr. didn't do the same things in Jacksonville that he did at LSU. Ladd McConkey did almost exactly what he did on the NFL level that he did at Georgia. And Mike has touched on this in previous shows, and I disagree with this in that he thinks that Ladd McConkey is going to be the safety option rather than the first read option. And I think that Justin Herbert is going to, beginning with this year, he's going to have learned to rely on Ladd McConkey to the point where he's going to be looking at Ladd as Jared Goff looks at Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Ladd McConkey is going to continuously lead the Chargers in targets. This year, surprising to me as I just found this out, so TIL, Ladd McConkey led the top three receivers in the Los Angeles Chargers wide receiver room in yards per target at 10.3. Quentin Johnston, who was second in total yards, had 7.8 yards per target. And Joshua Palmer was at 9 yards per target. So that blows me away because Ladd is the slot guy. Ladd is the yak guy. Ladd is the get him in open space against zone coverage and let him do his magic. And they're still targeting him further down the field than they were with Quentin Johnston, who's the deep threat. That tells me that Greg Roman understands that he has the 140 target a year guy that he misses from Baltimore and Hollywood Brown. And Ladd McConkey is going to be the dude in LA for the near future. They're not going to bring somebody in who's going to get open to the extent that Ladd McConkey will. And I think Ladd McConkey can see top 12 finishes in fantasy football over the next few years. It's not something that's out of the realm of possibility. And I love Ladd McConkey's future moving forward. And he was my wide receiver too in this rookie class. I drafted him over Rome Odunze. I drafted him over everybody except for Malik Nabers. And the only person that put a pin in that and said, fuck you, was Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, I think for me, what Amon-Ra has that I don't know if Ladd McConkey is going to have is that touchdown upside, like I mentioned, and just the overall volume, right? I think like Los Angeles Chargers are a much slower paced team. They run fewer plays. They don't give as much of their passing pie to the wide receivers that the Detroit Lions do. And Amon-Ra has shown that along with that slot short target stuff, he can also be a touchdown getter in the red zone. And so I just am not sure that on maybe a little bit lower volume, maybe a little bit more. I mean, Detroit's run first too. So but higher play volume run first in Detroit versus what we have in Los Angeles. So a little bit worried that just some of that offensive scheme plus the type of player he is, because I just don't think he is going to be getting those deep targets with regularity. I could see him continuing to be one of those guys. And I think that average depth of target, almost 12 yards, could be a bit of an outlier for him versus his career because they have a good quarterback. They have a really fun team. I think a position that they could stand to add is another receiver to kind of supplant Quentin Johnston. If they get one that is tiers above Quentin Johnston that can do some of the short target stuff plus some of that downfield target stuff, I could see that lead in targets for Los Angeles not holding up for a long time for Ladd McConkey. I don't want it. I like him, always rooting for those white skill position players, but you know, I just have some concerns of the overall ceiling for Ladd in that offense.
I do want to shout out real quickly in a Greg Roman offense, my hometown boy, Tucker Fisk, is the Patrick Ricard of that offense. His dad played in the NFL for a long time, was part of the Tennessee Titans Super Bowl team. He went to the same high school I went to. I played softball against his uncle. I grew up with his uncles, Tucker Fisk. Damn it. Tucker and a few letter name. Tucker Fisk is that dude. Listen for him when you're watching Red Zone and they say Tucker Fisk, because he'll have a catch per year. But he's the ultimate blocker, and he's that Patrick Ricard level guy in that Chargers offense. And shout out to Tucker Fisk.
There you have it. All right, let's move on to Marvin Harrison Jr., who's, you know, amongst a lot of us, we had him pegged as, a guy that was going to come in and be elite. And he had a disappointing rookie season for the Cardinals. Only 57 receptions, 822 yards, 7 touchdowns during those 16 fantasy games. And while he showed flashes of his talent, particularly, in his 6-catch, 96-yard performance against the Rams in week 16, his overall production fell short of his expectation of that number 4 overall pick. Harrison struggled with consistency, catching only 51% of his targets, failing to surpass 1,000 yards. His yards per route run at 1.72, not great, a little underwhelming compared to his college years, and it's indicating a limited impact on key plays. He's not finding room. He's not making, plays after the catch. His connection with Kyler Murray has failed to produce the type of fantasy production we'd all hoped for. So his year 2, it raises a lot of question marks. So considering Marvin Harrison Jr.'s underwhelming rookie season, bigz, especially his lack of consistent production despite being the number 4 overall pick, do you have concerns about his fantasy outlook in 2025 because he's, directly affiliated with Kyler, who doesn't seem to be able to get him the ball downfield? Or are you frozen right now? I think he's frozen. Yeah, Trav, I think you are.
I was muted. Oh,
yeah.
Fuck. Shit is crumbling around you right now, Grindberg. Shit is crumbling. Hoping bigz is okay, but I can fly in on a little Marv if you like. I think I'm still holding out a little bit of hope for Marv after kind of a dumpy first season in Arizona. I think maybe a little bit of growing pains. Obviously, we can't necessarily expect every wide receiver to blow it out of the park in their rookie season. And I know sometimes the NFL and especially fantasy gamers treat people that way, but I'm a big proponent of, sometimes guys just might take a year or two to see the upside that we saw coming out, right? And I have a hard time throwing out those evaluations too, right? He was a generational talent coming in. So why are we just throwing that out and not taking into account some of the other things that could have happened around him? Obviously, he didn't play very well himself. So I think there was a confluence of all of those things coming together for Marv. But I think he can fix some of those things. He did still get a massive chunk of the team's kind of air yards and targets as well. So he is going to be heavily targeted for years to come. We know that. And I think at the very least, if he can be kind of a stat compiler, kind of buoyed by his volume, as opposed to having some efficiency on top of that, that's fine. But I think even short of high efficiency receiving work, he could still be one of those guys that you could project to score 10 touchdowns in any given season, just with kind of the size, the catch radius stuff, the red zone prowess. And so I'm still holding out hope on Marvin. If there is opportunity to buy him low, I would absolutely do that. But it's hard. Like, you're definitely not selling a Malik Nabers or a Brian Thomas Jr. for him by any means. And so it'd be hard to see that other manager giving you a little bit of a discount off the price that they paid for him, right? So probably just a wait and see situation.
Yeah, he's a firm hold at this stage. You can't really do much with him. You're not going to get the value invested in him. And, if you were a guy that, or, anybody that drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., you have your evaluation on him already. So you think he's elite, and you're going to have to continue that train, right? So I think bigz is somewhat getting back here. We'll see if he can get back on the stream, but let's move on to Xavier Worthy there, Trav, and solid rookie season considering, for the Kansas City Chiefs, 59 receptions, over 600 yards, 6 touchdowns, but he really came on the latter half of the season despite his early struggles. His standout performance in week 17, 8 receptions, 79 yards, and a touchdown, showing the flashes. Now he's starting to get that chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. Yards per route run, first down per route run indicate he wasn't an elite threat at 1.33 and 0.075, but he showed opportunity when it mattered, especially in those high leverage moments. Worthy's increased role late in the season, coupled with his connection with Mahomes, gives him hope for a bigger second year. So given his late season surge and his impressive chemistry so far, how optimistic should we be with Xavier Worthy headed into 2025, especially with the return of Rashee Rice there, Trav?
Yeah, I like Worthy. I like him in this offense, and I like what we saw from him. He was the wide receiver 15 over the final 3 weeks of the fantasy season, as you alluded to. But For me, it's really hard to bite just because of the Chiefs wide receiver fallacy. It has killed me before, and I'm going to have a hard time letting it happen to me again. We always jump in on one of these Chiefs wide receivers, and we always get burned. I think the exception could be Rashee Rice, who we saw have a nice little first bit of the season before he got injured. And I think as we look at the value moving into 2025, I think I would probably attach myself more so to the volume potential of Rashee Rice, as opposed to kind of the efficiency and the big play upside of Xavier Worthy. But I don't know, maybe this is where that script gets flipped and we actually like Chiefs wide receivers now. Could be the case because these are some fun guys here, but yeah, I'm having a hard time because I think Xavier Worthy might price himself out for me, but I want to try and find ways to get him on some of my rosters, but I'm not sure if that's going to be necessarily in the cards. But needless to say, super fun player, right? For 4.2 140, comes in and gets attached to Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. We love to see it. And so I don't hate anybody who is paying those cost prices for him because I can see that upside. I might just be a little bit more of a risk averse fantasy player. One of the biggest things that I liked about Xavier Worthy is that he brought a little bit of Konami upside to the wide receiver position, scored 3 rushing touchdowns this season, and he had 5 games with multiple rushing attempts. And so a little bit of Konami code wide receiver situation there from Xavier Worthy, with obviously the play caller of the century in Big Red. So yeah.
Well, thank you for the question, Mike. And I can say that going into 24, I had Marvin Harrison Jr. in my analytics model as the wide receiver 6. And unfortunately, on the way to that happening, Jamari Thrash, Malachi Corley, and Troy Franklin didn't quite have the seasons that their analytics suggested they would. And Marvin Harrison Jr. finished as wide receiver 4 of the rookie class. He was the 4th wide receiver in the rookie class. He did have around a 50% catch rate from Kyler Murray, while Trey McBride had in the 70% catch rate range. So I will say definitively that Marvin Harrison Jr. will not have a breakout year until there's a new quarterback in Arizona or he's on another team. Wait, were we talking about Xavier Worthy?
No, we're going to be talking about a guy that I'm sure you're going to have a little bit to say about. So we'll probably cap it off after the wide receivers here, guys, and maybe set up another show for a recap show with the running backs and maybe some tight end action. But let's
talk for Brock Bowers. That's it. An hour and a half of Brock Bowers.
And Bucky Irving, because I'm sure we could talk about both those guys.
And Grindberg, we don't need to attend that one. It'll just be bigz, wax, and yeah.
Exactly.
Keep your fucking pants on, please.
Yeah. Okay, so we got 2 more wide receivers we're gonna hit up before we end the show here, and one is bigz's big guy here, rookie wide receiver Jalen McMillan. Had a quiet start to the season, but he emerged as quite a legitimate red zone threat down the stretch, finishing with 32 receptions, 387 yards, 7 touchdowns across his 12 games. Hit decent route yards per route run and first down per route run, but his ability to generate yards after the catch and touchdown upside was really good for him, including a couple of multi-touchdown performances, one notably against the Panthers. His ability to convert targets into touchdowns, coupled with his emerging chemistry with Baker Mayfield. His 2025 is going to be intriguing. I know that you're very high on him, regardless if they bring back Chris Godwin next year, because they're going to be in the similar situation why you are high on him headed into this season, bigz, because he's an injury away from being a primary target. So with that said, do you think he's going to be a primary target regardless if Chris Godwin comes back next year?
So one thing that we have seen with rookie wide receivers is traditionally rookie wide receivers don't break out. But if there is a rookie wide receiver that does break out, the majority of the time it happens in the second half of the season. You have a 21 or 22-year-old kid. Now, one thing we know about physical development, about adult development, is that people aren't fully formed until they're 25 in their brains, 27, 28 physically. And you have these 22-year-old kids who are coming into the league, and they're facing guys who are 26, 27, 28 years old, fully formed individuals in their brains, in their bodies, guys that have been working out weightlifting for the last 15, 20 years. And you have to try and beat them off the line. And you have to try and out physical them for a ball. And you have to outsmart them with your leverage and with your route control. So it is a learning curve for rookie wide receivers. That said, we do have guys like Malik Nabers that come in and immediately flash. Like, he was good from the get-go. Brock Bowers at tight end, immediately good. We knew that it was going to take some time for Jalen McMillan. We said in shows leading up to the season that Jalen McMillan was probably a second half breakout. It was going to take an injury to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin for him to get that starting snap share capital. And that's exactly what happened. And then once that happened, once Chris Godwin was out for the year and Mike Evans was out with a hamstring and it was Jalen McMillan's turn, Jalen McMillan got hurt. So it wasn't until the later weeks of the season and the money weeks, we're talking weeks 14 through 17, we're talking playoffs, that Jalen McMillan finished as wide receiver 6. Now, in camp, Baker Mayfield and Todd Bowles came out and said, this dude is different. He plays different. He uses his body different. He uses his hands different. He shows skills that are developed later on by wide receivers in terms of his ability to box somebody out with his body and reach out with his hands to make a catch. He was showing that in training camp before any games got started. On top of that, in 2022, with the Washington Huskies in a wide receiver room that included draft picks, Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk, with Michael Penix as their quarterback, and Ryan Grubb, the recently fired Seattle Seahawks dude, he led in yards and touchdowns. So in 2023, I correctly posited that it was better to let Rome Odunze get taken early, take somebody else, and let Jalen McMillan fall to you at value. And that's exactly what played out when both of them hit the NFL. If you drafted Jalen McMillan, you won your leagues because of his second half performance. When he finally got the eye of Baker Mayfield, the confidence of Liam Cohen, and showed exactly what we saw in his ability at Washington in 2022. Rome Odunze never became that guy. Jalen Polk was an injury replacement in 2023. He never became that guy. It was always Jalen McMillan that was that dude, and the narrative never caught up to his talent level. I love Jalen McMillan. He was my ultimate flag plant in 2024, and I will stand by that forever because that kid showed out, and he's got a huge career ahead of him.
Same boat for me. I'll try not to take too much time because I love
Northwest, baby.
All right. I'm in a completely different country, so I have no fucking clue what that means. But
you're like 20 miles away from Seattle.
But yeah, I thought Jalen McMillan, like, everybody hated this landing spot, and I fucking loved it. I thought Chris Godwin's going to be a free agent, and Jalen McMillan is a guy who can come in and supplant a lot of that production pretty quickly after the work that he did in a pro-style offense at Washington. Very high-powered offense where he was able to take a heavy volume of targets. That's the kind of stuff you like to see as a guy who can translate that skill set into the NFL. So I was with you on that, bigz. I might, draw the line at saying that you should have taken the discount and drafted him over Rome Odunze, because I think Rome Odunze.
No, that's not what I said. I said, okay, take a Jalen McMillan, take somebody else instead of Rome Odunze, and then take Jalen McMillan at value in the next round or 2 rounds later. That's what
I think for me, it might be an indictment on my feelings towards Rome Odunze, because I think he could potentially be one of the best receivers in the entire NFL in a couple of seasons. But I loved all the Washington wide receivers, truth be told, because I thought they all were going to have a chance to start right away and earn some of those targets right away with what we saw in college. But not so much for Jalen Polk, but pretty happy that it's sort of working out for the other two so far. It looks like it shall work out for the other two.
The real question out of University of Washington is, what the fuck happened to Dylan Johnson?
Yeah, no doubt. Nothing.
That dude was he was a bell cow profile, like between the tackles, receptions kid, and just washed out. Like,
yeah, I didn't see
what?
the target work as much, but maybe I just didn't dig a little bit deeper. But I definitely thought he was going to be some team's big-bodied plotter for sure.
Every time I looked up, the Huskies, Penix was dumping off to Dylan Johnson. And I was like, oh, he's got reception upside. Okay, I love him. And just nothing.
I think I know what
Practice
kind of
squad
run
guy.
it. I think you and Mr. Joe Kuvatakis are in the same boat that you guys like big backs and you cannot lie.
Why?
Cannot
Exactly. They can't. Well, let's
But
talk about.
you know what? You other brothers can't deny when a dude walks by with a never mind.
Okay. We talked about that and that came up on our show. We were talking about
I
Bucky
know.
Irving, and I just have to talk about this tweet that I put out because I put it out with a clip of Jack saying that Joe can't deny. And I said, when Bucky walks in with an itty bitty waist and says, "Look, bruh, in your face," some of my best work.
You're the one with bars, not me.
Yeah, exactly.
A bit of a rapper, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no kidding. I love it. Well, let's keep into that Washington,
Wait,
college room.
Canadia's best white rapper since Snow.
Since J-Rock.
Well, aren't you neighbors with Buble? Like, don't you guys share bubblies in the backyard?
We absolutely do not. No, we absolutely don't.
No. Weren't you in his Christmas album? I swear that voice in the background is
trying not to tell people about that. I have a reputation to keep up in the fantasy football space, and if that gets into it, that's bad news, brother. So don't
Michael Bublé,
please don't go look for it, please. Yeah,
he's a dog.
All right, well, let's talk about a guy that you just mentioned that could be a guy that you were thinking that might be one of the best in the NFL for years to come, and that's Rome Odunze. Solid but inconsistent rookie season for the Bears, finishing with 52 receptions, 716 yards, 3 touchdowns across those 16 games, despite the team's struggles, especially at quarterback with fellow rookie Caleb Williams. We talked about him in depth a little bit here. Have some optimism. So we're obviously a little bit optimism about Odunze. He showcased his potential in some clutch situations, leading the NFL, in 90 receiving yards on 4th down, displaying his elite ball skills and, route running in crucial moments. His best play came on a high pointed 30-yard catch against the Lions, showing his highlight ability in contested catch situations. We know he's got the talent, the pedigree, now a top 10 pick, his ability to step up in clutch moments. How optimistic should we be, Trav, about his future? You said top elite status. So when are we looking for this to come to fruition if that were to happen?
I would be sending out offers as soon as right now. I'd be trying to shop. If I think I have like a mid to late first round draft pick in this year's rookie draft, I would be absolutely trying to target Rome Odunze with one of those. I don't know what those tiers are going to look like, but I would rather attach to Rome as opposed to the uncertainty of that draft class. Excuse me. And yeah, so I'd be sending out offers as soon as right now for him because that breakout is going to come next season. I am very confident of that. His role is going to expand so significantly on what we saw. And the season that he had this year was middling, but that was kind of what we expected. I think talking about those expectations, you really got to make sure you set them. And if you looked at what was going to happen in Chicago this year with the signing of Keenan Allen and DJ Moore still being there, this was always going to happen for Rome Odunze. So I was in no way disappointed. Keenan Allen's a free agent. I don't know if he's going to sign with Chicago. He might want a chance at a title. And he was easily their most effective pass catcher this year. Keenan Allen, far and away their most effective pass catcher, in my opinion. So I think Rome Odunze is a guy who can profile as an inside and outside guy, very effective from the slot with his size. I think he takes that over and then some. And I think at Keenan's age, Rome Odunze just in himself has more built-in upside with what he can do at his age. So yeah, wheels up for Rome. Don't have it offhand, but I think he is borderline top 12 dynasty wide receiver for me already, fellas.
Okay, so that's you're aggressively going after him for sure there. Biggs, what are your thoughts on Rome?
Well, they can best be presented as I read this article that I wrote about Rome Odunze versus Jalen McMillan. It starts with, I want to build a prototypical NFL wide receiver prospect. He needs to produce. I'm looking for speed below a 4.6 second 40-yard dash. Odunze ran a 4.45. I want a minimum size of 175 pounds or over 6 feet in height. Odunze clears both. I want a receiver to have competition on his team from other NFL projectable receivers. Odunze has McMillan. The only way he falls short is in his declare age and his breakout age. Now, with Jalen McMillan, speed check, size check, breakout age same, declare same, competition same. It's almost like we're dealing with clones. The only advantage now looking at it that Odunze has over McMillan is height. He's a little bit taller, a little bit bigger, and a little bit faster, which is kind of big.
Better in contested catch situations as well.
Yeah, I see them as very, very similar. They were recruited by the same guy that wanted to bring them into the system, and at the same time. So I see them still as kind of clones of each other, which means that Odunze was drafted a little bit higher than maybe what his value was, and McMillan was drafted a little bit later than what his perceived value was. So as soon as their quarterbacks, their offensive coordinators, their organizations realize what they have in them, in that Odunze can take over as the #1 target guy in Chicago, and McMillan can take over at some point as the #1 target guy in Tampa Bay. I see them in very similar places. So what that says about Odunze dropping and McMillan rising, I don't know. Could it mean that Odunze stays the same and McMillan reaches that level? Sure. Could it say that McMillan stays where he's at and Odunze drops a little bit? That might be the case too. But no. I see them as kind of in lockstep, and they're both very highly coveted in my dynasty leagues across the board. I love both of them. Going into this year, one of my caveats was don't be afraid to win now. And that's when I was drafting Ladd McConkey over Rome Odunze, because I thought that Ladd McConkey would have a better year than Odunze did this year. That's the case. Moving forward for building teams, Odunze is a guy that at his value right now, with a whole lot of owners that spent significant draft capital to get him, who are out on him because of his catch rate, because of what he did, and the fact that he's in an offense with other weapons and Caleb Williams still learning and everything. Right now is the time to capitalize on his value and go ahead and get him, because there's only improvement from here.
Yeah. If I had Ladd, I would trade Ladd to somebody for Rome Odunze straight up, but I think you might be able to get a plus on him for it.
I would do it for the plus. I don't know if I'd do it for the straight up. I still love Ladd so much.
I think you could get a plus on Odunze for Ladd in some situations.
That's what I mean. Odunze plus I would do. I don't think I'd do Ladd for Rome straight up.
Oh, okay. I see what yeah. Interesting. I'm gonna go check the leagues that we play in together, buddy.
There we go.
So that's a funny thing, because
don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Don't.
Okay, I won't talk about the fact that I was offering Travis trades and then asking him in Discord about should I trade this guy for that guy when I'm offering.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about that we both came in as orphans, and my team is way better than yours, and you wanted the title, and I didn't even make the playoffs. No. You've already rubbed that one in, is what you're saying.
No. Travis and I both took over orphans in an undroppables dynasty league last year. And we both finished in the playoffs. Fantastic.
Oh, I did make the playoffs in that one.
Yeah. Nice. What I was talking about is, I think it was in that league, you were doing like an open forum in Discord, and I was asking you questions about trading. And then I was making you trade offers based on your answers of those Discord questions.
Yep.
That I was
downside of doing an AMA where your buddies can see all your shit.
Right. So I was like, hey, should I trade this guy for that guy? And it was your guy for my guy. And you're like, no. And I was like, okay, how about this guy for that guy? And you're like, yeah. And I sent you trade offers, and then nothing ever came.
So on that note, make sure you go sign up for the Undroppables Patreon so that you can get into that Discord and you can watch bigz troll me while I'm trying to do an AMA for the patrons.
I was texting Grindberg. This is the offer I sent to Trav.
I had no idea. Not a clue.
It's good. Yeah, well, that's just how we roll here on the Pulse. We're about, playing some jokes and enjoying the time together. Trav, you've been an awesome guest. We're going to have you back absolutely on the show to maybe talk about, the one running back that broke out and the one tight end. But it was a blast having you on the show. Appreciate you. Tell everybody about your new show and what it's all about, because it's huge and you got a star-studded cast. So tell everybody about it.
Yeah, man, it's been fun. I've been out of the podcast game for a little bit. Felt really itchy to get back behind the mic. And so just kind of the perfect storm came up, and we started a show called Dynasty Underground on the Undroppables platform with Jax Falcone and Joe Kuvatakis, who's one of the, I guess not as recent anymore Undroppables member, but within the last year. So it's been really fun to get together with the boys.
NorCal.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Joe Kuvatakis. He's the man. He's the man. We just did a show, just the two of us last night, because Jax wasn't able to make it. I actually think, though, that show will be out before this one, fellas. So anybody who's watching right now would love if you go check it out on the Undroppables YouTube channel or on the audio platforms. It's it's just been really fun. And you guys know me, I like to get in there with the graphics and do all the producing and stuff like that and all the edits and stuff. So having fun with that stuff as well as the rest of the Undroppables content, and which includes you two fellas. So I'm excited with what we're doing moving forward and excited to be kind of in the trenches with you boys.
Yeah, so man, it's been a blast.
Everybody that plays Dynasty Fantasy Football should be watching the Dynasty Underground. Also, everybody that loves anything about football should be listening to the Undrafted, especially our last episode with
That's right. You guys were on for an episode. I love that.
And our 2024 awards. But also, everybody that doesn't live in Canada should be downloading the Fast Draft app, fastdraft.app, or you can search it in Google as draftfaster.com. Use code BOOTH, BOOTH. That's Bravo, Oscar, Tango, H. And get a $25 match on your first time deposit of $25. Just play around. We have excellent playoff games, DFS. Download the Fast Draft app and do that. Also, go to Underdog and use code Undroppable, and you'll get a deposit match there. Listen to all of our stuff. I know you do, because you're in fantasy land and you already watched the Dynasty Pulse, and you're already huge Undroppables watchers. So thank you. We appreciate your support.
Absolutely. And from all of us here on the Fantasy Football Plus Network, on the Undroppables Network, appreciate everybody from tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Dynasty Pulse. So peace out, everybody.
Schlant.